Thanks so much for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Lori Johnson. A new report about graphic details about CIA torture methods used after 9/11 is expected to be released by the Senate this week. The report is said to be so shocking that officials fear it could spark protests and violence. Dale Hurd has that story.
U.S. embassies around the world are bracing for the fallout from the release of a top-secret report on the use of torture by the CIA.
This will, in fact, incite violence, and it's likely to cost someone their life.
According to officials who have read it, the document includes disturbing new details about the CIA's use of sleep deprivation, confinement in small spaces, humiliation, and the simulated drowning process known as waterboarding. Senator Dianne Feinstein called the torture chilling, brutal, and un-American.
We tortured some folks. We did some things that were contrary to our values.
President Obama has since banned the practices, and the Bush administration has come under heavy criticism for the post-9/11 interrogation techniques. Over the weekend, the former head of the CIA rejected accusations his agency lied about the effectiveness of the methods.
To say that we relentlessly, over an expanded period of time, lied to everyone about a program that wasn't doing any good, that beggars the imagination.
The fear is that the report will not only put U.S. overseas interest in danger and incite violence, but will be a powerful new recruiting tool for Muslim terrorists like ISIS. But terrorists have already made Americans their top targets, including the death over the weekend of American Luke Summers and a South African, killed by their captors in a failed U.S. rescue attempt in Yemen. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
6 prisoners released from Guantanamo Bay are beginning a new life in the South American country of Uruguay. The 4 Syrians, 1 Tunisian and 1 Palestinian, were all held in Gitmo since the prison opened in 2002 for the purpose of holding terror suspects. The 6 were cleared for release 5 years ago, but there was not a country who would take them until Uruguay stepped up. It is a mostly Christian country with only about 300 Muslims, and now only 136 prisoners remain at Gitmo. More releases are expected by the end of the year. President Obama has wanted to close Guantanamo Bay Detention Center since beginning office.
U.S. and NATO forces have ceremonially ended their combat mission in Afghanistan, transitioning now to a training and support role. It's been 13 years since the September 11 terror attack sparked the invasion of the country to topple the Taliban-led government. Starting January 1st, 2015, the coalition will maintain 13,000 troops in Afghanistan, down from a peak of around 140,000 3 years ago. The U.S. troop total is expected to shrink to near zero by the end of 2016.
Syria's opposition forces claim an Israeli airstrike destroyed Hezbollah drones and missiles Sunday. The report came from the Lebanese newspaper Al Akhbar. Israel says it doesn't comment on foreign reports. The attacks targeted anti-aircraft missile batteries and an airbase near Damascus airport. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had cautioned in Sunday's cabinet meeting that Israel would deal with Middle East threats and challenges because, quote, they do not take a timeout. Syria's government claims there were no casualties.
What started out as a peaceful protest took a violent turn in Berkeley, California last night. Authorities say unruly demonstrators smashed windows, threw explosives at police officers, and some marchers blocked traffic on a freeway on-ramp. Police responded with tear gas. The protests come after the latest high-profile grand jury decision in New York City, where a white police officer was not indicted in the chokehold death of Eric Garner. In the aftermath of the decision, the NYPD immediately began retraining its entire police force.
If you train the police in a different approach to use of force, in a different approach to communication with community, a different approach to building relationships with community, you won't see these tragedies.
A civil rights investigation is underway in the Eric Garner case. Later in the newscast, we'll take a look at how the latest police-involved deaths are playing out on social media.
How low will they go? Gas prices have been plunging at the pump in the last few months, and the drop isn't over yet. It may be bad news for anti-American oil exporters like Russia and Iran, but it's great news for American drivers and for the U.S. economy.
They are the lowest gas prices in more than 4 years, and drivers across the country couldn't be happier.
It's going to go down even more. Thank God. Thank you. Thank you.
Even better for delivery drivers, man. I'm delivering in the Bay Area, and cheaper gas helps me with my family.
Oil prices are down around 40% since the middle of June, dropping below $70, something that would have been unheard of just a few months ago. More than 60% of U.S. gas stations are already selling gas lower than $3. The national average is down to $2.77 a gallon, and it could go even lower, down another 10 to 20 cents. It's a boost for the economy because the lower gas prices are like a tax cut for anyone who buys gas.
With someone that commutes, it does add up over, the weeks and the months.
Those lower gas prices are a good sign for consumer spending as the holiday season approaches, because the more drivers save at the pump, the more they'll have to splurge on presents and everything else. But it's not necessarily great news for countries that export oil, like oil exporting countries in the Middle East, Russia, Venezuela, and others. Venezuela will bring in less money from oil, and that could hurt an economy that already faces problems. Russia's economy is also already hurting because the value of the ruble has been falling on the international markets, and inflation has been heading higher. And the Washington Post reports lower oil prices could hurt Iran, which relies on money from selling oil. Lower oil prices could hit the Iranian economy, which is already under international sanctions because of its nuclear program. No one really knows the full impact of falling oil prices because they drop so fast. So for now, many companies and countries are simply wondering how they'll deal with this new world of cheap oil. The latest national survey reveals the average price of regular gasoline has plunged 12 cents a gallon in just the past 2 weeks.
Congress is taking another step this week to preserve a war memorial cross at Mount Soledad in California. The Senate is expected to approve a bill that could save the 43-foot cross overlooking the city of San Diego. The House has already passed the measure that authorizes the Defense Department to transfer the federal land where the cross sits to a private veterans memorial group. Federal courts have ruled that the cross is an unconstitutional government endorsement of religion. In a similar case, a memorial cross in California's Mojave Desert was preserved 2 years ago when a judge allowed the National Park Service to turn over the land to private veterans groups.
Satanists will be able to put up a holiday display in the Florida state capitol this month. CBS Miami is reporting the display shows an angel falling into hell and will have a banner on top that says, "Happy Holidays" from the Satanic Temple. The display will appear among nativity scenes and secular presentations.
Coming up, it was one of the top worst storms ever seen on this planet. Hear how this mayor and his family survived and how they've been helping rebuild their city ever since.
Matthew and Grace Wong are back in America after being held in Qatar for almost a year following the death of their adopted daughter. Sunday, the couple went to church at Pasadena's Lake Avenue Church along with their 2 children. The Wongs say the time they spent in Qatar was difficult, but it taught them to be patient and to trust God. The couple gained international attention when Qatari authorities arrested them on charges of starving their African-born daughter to death.
Typhoon Hagupit has been downgraded to a tropical storm, but not before unleashing destructive winds that killed at least 27 people in the Philippines. Many of those people drowned in the eastern Samar province, where the storm made its first landfall. Nearly 1 million people fled to shelters as the storm moved toward the capital, Manila. Hagupit is moving slowly, and its heavy rains could trigger landslides and flash floods.
This latest storm comes as the Philippines is still recovering from last year's Super Typhoon Haiyan. Just over a year ago, Haiyan leveled entire villages and left more than 7,300 people dead or missing. Now, for the first time, the mayor of the demolished city of Tacloban is speaking out. He tells CBN News about how his faith in God helps with the challenges of rebuilding a destroyed city. George Thomas brings us the exclusive interview.
November 8th, 2013.
This is probably one of the top 12, so in the top dozen of all storms ever seen on this planet.
As Super Typhoon Haiyan slams into eastern Philippines. Tacloban Mayor Alfred Romualdez and a few staff members are stranded at this beachfront location.
A song that I was singing throughout the time was, "You are my world, you are my God, and I lay down my life for you."
Suddenly, a storm surge hits the building, as seen in this video obtained exclusively by CBN News.
And I was asking God, just give me a few minutes, even an hour, just to get down here to make sure my family is okay. Then if it's time for me to go, then that's it.
Romualdez and the others punch a hole in the ceiling to escape rising water. And just in time, as another tidal wave hits. Meanwhile, across town at his beach house, Romualdez's wife and 2 children are also on the verge of being swept away by tsunami-like waves. The entire time she's reciting the whole of Psalm 91.
I will dwell in the shelter of the Most High God. I will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, you are my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust.
The couple says it's a miracle they survived.
When you're faced with death, as I was several times during that day, you completely forget everything. I never went back to my house to check my belongings till after like 5 days. But what was in me were lives of people. I got my family. I was going out there and saving lives.
As soon as the storm passed, the mayor hit the streets clearing debris and coordinating search and rescue operations. Over 6,000 people died that day. Romualdez says he knew he had to give people hope to help them pull through.
Because people have come to me and they were questioning their faith and they were asking me, why did God take away my children? What did they do wrong? And then I said, do you want to see God? Yes, then you'd have to die. You'd have to overcome death. And Christianity is not focused on death. It's focused on afterlife.
A year later, he's still encouraging residents of his city to draw close to God.
And the purpose and what I tell people is that, when it comes to God, I ask questions, but I don't question. I ask questions and I ask, Lord, why did this happen?
Have you had an answer yet?
Yes.
And what does he say?
And the answer clearly is that, it's not a miracle that you survive, because at the end of the day, you're going to die. What's a miracle here and the blessing here and the grace of God is that where you're going to go after that.
1, 2, 3.
The mayor's wife, a former actress turned politician, organized several evangelistic outreaches in Tacloban, including this worship event which took place on the storm's 1-year anniversary.
Anything could happen any minute. You could lose your life any second, any day. So people need to realize, and I think people have realized that there's no other way you can go but relying on God and walking with God every day.
It's a spiritual sentiment that runs deep in this city, as I discovered while riding Tacloban's most popular means of public transportation.
It's good to have a mayor who trusts God and encourages us to trust him as well. He almost lost his life. He knows the pain we're enduring a year after the storm. We need God's help to rebuild our destroyed city.
The mayor has taken a lot of heat in the last year for his government's slow response to the rebuilding efforts. How much is the Philippine Star? 25, 5, 10, 20, 25. Thank you, sir. But in reality, you talk to many Taclobans, and they will blame the national government in Manila.
It's not the mayor's fault. The national government is wrongly accusing him of inaction when the blame should be on them for not doing enough to help us rebuild.
Romualdez says thanks to international aid agencies like CBN Disaster Relief, Tacloban is slowly getting back on its feet. In the last 12 months, CBN Disaster Relief teams have built temporary homes for over 1,500 families, restored 9 schools, and helped thousands of typhoon victims with livelihood projects.
I was very glad, when I saw the guys come in, because I know they work fast. And they were one of the first ones who built temporary, or what we call transitional shelters. And they were fast.
Mayor Romualdez is a very busy man these days, trying to rebuild and restore hope to his city.
I just pray for the mayor and his family, Father.
He clings to his faith and is trusting God to fulfill his divine purposes for Tacloban.
Being more like Christ is really living dangerously. We are not told that there is a disaster, so we will hide. No. We are told that there are disasters to come, there are challenges to come for us to face it, and God will be with us, and you're going to come out of it. Having a strong faith is the key. You can't do it alone.
George Thomas, CBN News, Tacloban, Philippines.
Wow, we need more mayors like that in the United States.
Indeed. Oh, just to see him be able to put his faith in action and live it out and lead that city, and they respect and honor that. Beautiful.
I loved it. And my favorite line of his was when he said, the miracle isn't the fact that we were saved from the typhoon, but what happens after death.
Amen.
The miracle of salvation.
You got that right. Beautiful, beautiful.
Well, up next, recent police-involved death cases are sparking protests across America. They're also making a major impact on social media. We'll show you how.
Welcome to the Digital Download.
Today we're talking about a serious issue. We're seeing people across the country erupting in protest, responding to the decision in New York not to indict an officer who chokehold Eric Garner.
Right. And Ephraim, I understand that you were actually in New York when the decision was made. So can you speak to that?
That's right. You see the video there on the screen unfolding. It was Wednesday when I landed in New York, and literally the grand jury made the decision. The mayor pretty quickly responded saying that he himself was personally disappointed that there was no indictment. And immediately following that, there were protests in the street. The good thing, they were peaceful, but they did caused the city to come to a halt in many areas. I was just trying to get from my hotel to another part of town and could not do it in a taxi cab. I had to literally say, just let me off here. I will walk to where I need to go. Lots of people upset. They're calling for change. We heard from Bishop Harry Jackson responding to this, and he's given some insight into why people are protesting and, more importantly, how the church needs to take the lead and help address the issues that they're talking about. Let's take a listen.
This last incident has really just brought all of our historic problems once again to the fore. But I want to warn your audience today that I don't think that blacks are saying all whites are racist and this is a sign of manifest racism in New York or in St. Louis, the Ferguson area. What they are basically saying is it's time for us to address this problem.
And Caleb, of course, you've been following what they've been saying on social media, and there is a lot to talk about.
There was a lot. From Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, they're all talking about this issue, particularly with the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Okay. Now, with Black Lives Matter, people are just basically sharing their heart about the situation. There's a lot of people protesting in regard to laying on the ground, similar to Garner's death, in a silent act of protest. And also, CBN News Facebook that's been blowing up as well. People are saying that these people are actually not innocent. Okay. They were committing crimes, so therefore, the officer might have been in the right to do these things, which can be a little controversial. We also have people saying that, in reality, the media are the ones that are blowing it up.
Okay. Well, the media is certainly part of telling the story, but I would caution, we know the grand jury decided in Ferguson, as well as this case, not to indict. But we have to ask ourselves this question. While these people are not innocent, is the punishment death? Is that really, is that really fit the crime for whatever it is they were doing? Should they have lost their lives as a result?
Right. I think the thing is mostly because we've had 3 tragedies occur, in a very short amount of time. These issues seem to be really polarizing. We're seeing people taking pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and then comparing them to Trayvon Martin's, to the Ferguson, to the Garner, and making this a civil rights issue. In regard to the media continuing to blow it up, we know that Jason Ross, who's one of the writers for Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, created a hashtag called Criming While White.
That's interesting.
Crime While White. Now, the point of this hashtag is to show a double standard about what's occurring. So you have people saying things like, oh, when I was 16, I hit an officer in the face, and the officer said, hey, don't do that again, and sent me on my way. A lot of different sides to this issue. So the question is, what do we do about it?
Absolutely. What do we do? And that is why we want to hear from you. Please keep it positive. We want you to weigh in at CBN News Garner Chat. Use that as the hashtag. We want to hear what you're thinking. Remember, we as the church, we as believers need to take the lead in solving the world's crises and bringing Christ to the situation. So let's keep it positive and do just that.
All right.
That's extremely important. Well, I'm Ephraim Graham.
And I'm Caleb Kinchlow, and this is your Digital Download.
Sunday marked National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, a time to honor all who died during the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941.
Through the attack, although the attack brought many lives to an end, it's also where stories of redemption began. The book Wounded Tiger tells the true account of the Japanese military man who led the attack on Pearl Harbor and his drastic life change when he met an American prisoner of war. CBN News had the privilege of speaking with Mark Bennett, the author of Wounded Tiger, about the book.
It's the true story of the pilot who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, whose life was transformed by an American prisoner and by a girl he never met. There's 3 plot lines that run concurrently, and they're completely separate and independent, but then they slowly come together. The first is Mitsuo Fuchida, who was the lead pilot in the Imperial Japanese Navy, who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, who was slated to lead the attack both in Midway as well. And he ended up in Hiroshima, got called away. The next day, the city was bombed. His life story is a phenomenal story. And then parallel to that is the story of Mitsuo Fuchida, Jake DeShazer. He was an American bombardier. He was on the Doolittle raid, and they attacked Japan in 1942. He ended up becoming a prisoner of war, and he was full of hatred toward the Japanese and just wanted to kill as many as possible. Then there's a third plot line, that's the Covell family. They were teachers and missionaries in Japan, and they loved the Japanese, but they despised war. So when Japan started to ramp up for war, they moved their family to the Philippines, where they believed they'd be safe under the protection of the United States and General Douglas MacArthur. So these 3 stories run parallel, and then they slowly come together.
Now, Bennett says he had an opportunity to sell the screenplay of his book, but he turned down a Hollywood offer because he didn't want the studio to leave out the spiritual aspects of the redemption in the story.
What a great book. Wounded Tiger would be a good Christmas present.
Indeed, indeed. Shopping around. Good to get. Well, that is going to do it for now here on CBN News Today. You can find more exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com.
And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. We hope you'll join us again next time. Have a great day, everyone.